Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the advisory chart here, we've got first the ones that are missing. A freezing rain advisory for Valdez for tonight through tomorrow. And also there's a freezing rain advisory here for areas of the Copper River Basin. And that starts tonight and extends through tomorrow as well. Up here to the north, mostly north of Chicken, winter weather advisory there for up to 4 inches of snow tomorrow through Tuesday for that part of the state. And then back here on the Arctic coast on the west side, winter weather advisory there for snow and blowing snow, as well as cold wind chills as low as 50 degrees below zero. And that's out through tonight and tomorrow, actually until 6 p.m. Wednesday. So expect those conditions to kind of last a couple of days. On the satellite, here's the next system rolling northward with the heavy wind and rain already into Kodiak Island and just about storm force winds into the North Gulf Coast, extending back all the way into the Barren Islands and to Kamishak Bay. Storm warnings out there through tonight, and then they fall back tomorrow. And you can see clouds increasing and rain spreading into the east as well as to the north, and also back to the west. Pretty good fair area here from the northern Bering Sea in across the central interior. Maybe a few flurries, but nothing significant at all. And then it clears out and colder up here on the Arctic coast, and you can see the sea ice up there a little farther to the north. Back to the west, not a lot going on, but there is this area low pressure that's south of the central or the western Aleutians there, and that bringing some gale force winds out of the east, 30 to 40 mile per hour with higher gusts, and also, or 30 to 40 knots with higher gusts. They're just kind of spinning in place, and then a break here over the central Aleutians. And rolling that through again, you can see how everything's progressing. Got a weakening front right through here, and that kind of combined up with the moisture coming in from the northeast. And that brought about over 1.5 inches of rain to Unalaska today with those two features, and then back up to the north, 0.07 of an inch at St. Paul, just catching a little bit of that. And on the chart today, the front earlier, right in this position here, really weakening. There's the low farther out to the west there. It brought those stronger winds, 30 gusts, 50 miles an hour at Shemya. And then all the wind and rain with this system pulling northward, and the dry area in between, and the Arctic high up here off the Arctic coast and over the Arctic, clearing it out, and that's where the colder temperatures are. For tonight, again, storm warnings, gales and storms. Actually, gale warnings, the entire stretch of the southeast coast up into the eastern Gulf Coast, and then gales or storms, definitely storms from the western Gulf Coast here across the Barren Islands and on up into Kamishak Bay, with southeast winds holding on pretty good there for Kodiak Island. Rain heavy at times, and a mixed precipitation condition again, actually from the Copper River Basin, northeast Prince William Sound, in across south central Alaska as that warmer air overrides the below freezing surface temperatures. Bands of flurries up here over the northern interior, but moisture on the increase here all the way up to the Alaska range, and that's going to continue into tomorrow. Some of that coming back and around, and this system here just barely affecting the western Aleutians, falling back to the west. And for tomorrow, that high up to the north kind of progresses eastward a little bit there, so the gradient with the lower pressure keeps the pressure pretty tight there in the western Arctic coast. But again, the stronger winds and lowest visibilities in the snow and blowing snow and the lowest wind chills will be southwest of Point Lay down to about Cape Lisburne, possibly Point Hope. Doesn't look like too bad conditions here over the northwest, and the Arctic or the North Slope looking really good. But you can see the chance of some freezing rain again in Anchorage tomorrow, as well as the Matanuska and Susitna Valley areas, with that extending back into the Copper River Basin, and still south to north flow, so a fair amount of moisture, but generally on the decrease a little bit, especially later in the day as this next system begins to develop, and a little bit drier conditions ahead of that progress northward. Otherwise, rain changing to showers over the Panhandle with diminishing winds, and starting out with gale force winds with this trough here coming into Bristol Bay, and then those will drop back under gales tomorrow afternoon, and a little sooner here to the south as that swings up, but pretty breezy here over the western interior, and rain and snow showers scattered around the Bering Sea, but mostly to the north of the Aleutian. Some of those could come down and catch on Alaska anytime during the day tomorrow. And then for Wednesday, another front comes northward. Gradient tightens up again, so possible gales and storm force winds, or probably definitely gales with possible storm force winds there, but coming back up to the coastline. Again, with the rain becoming possibly heavy at times. Looks like the heaviest rain with this will slide up anywhere from Yakutat over to the possibly Elfin Cove area, and then extend down to the south, but lighter amounts. Rain definitely back along the Alaska Peninsula, extending all the way over to a few showers around Atka, with a dry swath here from the 40-mile country, eastern Tanana Valley, say from about Eagle, mostly clear skies all the way down across possibly the just north of the Susitna Valley into Bristol Bay, and then the remnants of this trough up here, keeping some flurries and clouds in over the Brooks Range, and then back across the Selawik Valley and the Seward Peninsula to St. Lawrence Island, with some clearing showing up over the southeast Bering Sea, and kind of unsettled out over the western Aleutians. Temperatures today, 50 degrees in Homer, looks like the warm spot in the state, and contrast that with 45 in Cordova, not too far off, and then 48 down here at Ketchikan, 45 over at Petersburg, and 36 at Juneau, 20 degrees in Gulkana with a 27-degree reading at Anchorage, 36 in Kenai, lower to mid-40s Kodiak Island, and up in the Tanana Valley, kind of a range from 13 at Tanana to 25 at Fairbanks, 19 over at Delta, up to the north a little ways. Bettles had 15 with 9 degrees at Anatuvik, but 17 below over at Arctic Village, and pretty chilly here on the Arctic coast with minus 24. Looks like at, I think that's Atrasuk, and minus 20 at Dead Horse, minus 11 at Kaktovik, Barrow at minus 19. Back above zero here when you get over to Cape Lisburne, Point Hope up to 12. Lower to mid-20s at Buckland and Selawik, with Kotzebue at 18, but up to 38 in Nome, 28 at Unalakleet, 11 degrees in McGrath, Sparravon up to 33 degrees and 47 at Iliamna, and then back into the 20s along the coast until you get down to Cape Newenham, 41 degrees, lower 40s here for the Alaska Peninsula, and then near 40 everywhere else out to the west. For lows tonight, again quite cold, 20 to 30 below for the North Slope Arctic coast, and near zero here through the interior, except below over toward the Yukon Flats, and south much milder conditions here, mid to upper 30s for Bristol Bay, and lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s to mid 40s for the Panhandle, and quite a range here, upper 20s to upper 30s there for the southern areas of Alaska. And for the highs tomorrow, 40s in the Aleutians as well as the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s to lower to mid 40s with the warmest conditions out along the coast here for southern Alaska, and then north of the mountains, teens for the most part, except where the winds might pick up and warm it into the lower 20s there, and definitely up around 30 there for the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, with below zero conditions, north slope down into the Yukon Valley. Flying weather, IFR, hitting the southeast coast here and then spreading northward, and probably by midday that'll be all the way up into the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, right up to White Pass, with areas of marginal VFR, kind of surges of moisture. Lowest conditions will be on the southern slopes of the Alaska Range as well as along the Coast Range here, and western Prince William Sound down the Kenai Peninsula coast. could be some areas of VFR in the downslope areas off the Chugach Mountains there from, say, Anchor Point all the way up to Palmer, and then back into the IFR along and on the west side, or on the east side of the western Alaska Range. Kodiak Island, marginal VFR, mostly the southwest, Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, with marginal VFR, though, covering most of the Gulf of Alaska. IFR, Pribilofs, extending south to Cape Sarachev and possibly the eastern Aleutians, but just some marginal VFR out over the remainder of the chain, and possible marginal VFR in the eastern Arctic coast. Anaktuvik looks pretty good tomorrow. Adigan, though, marginal VFR at times possible. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, lowest conditions. Both passes will be on the eastern entrances with better flying conditions off to the west. Rainy, IFR. On the eastern entrance, that'll be the lowest conditions. And for windy, marginal VFR, it could be a possibility of some IFR here in the southern entrance, but generally better as you go north. And for Isabel, IFR south, marginal VFR through the pass, possible IFR on the north entrance. And for Mentasta, a little better over that way. Look for some occasional marginal VFR, mainly on the southern entrance, but north side VFR. For Tanita, possible marginal VFR on the eastern entrance, otherwise VFR. Portage, IFR with the lowest conditions, which could go possibly low IFR. Well, that'll be on the eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, becoming IFR, and that'll probably last most of the day. Freezing levels, warmer air coming up northward, 2,000 feet here. Getting up to the Seward Peninsula, and then a pocket of 4,000 foot warm air here coming over the southwest interior, and that freezing levels 2,000 to 4,000 feet right across the Panhandle. Moving on to the icing chart, mostly below 10,000 to 12,000 feet here, with areas of moderate, occasional to widespread moderate rime and mixed icing here over the northeast areas right across Yakutat, and then again here on the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise, light to isolated moderate rime here in the remainder of the shaded areas. Pretty solid. Possibilities a lot less up here to the north, and some scattered areas back to the west. Could be a batch of some moderate stuff out here just west of the Pribilofs. Otherwise, the Aleutians pretty well in the clear, as well as the western and northern interior. For the winds aloft, you can see high pressure loft in this area. Still have that pattern jet coming up from the south, kind of splitting here, cutting into the north. Upper level high persisting over the northwest with general area troughiness here just south of the Aleutians. And at 9,000 feet, southwesterlies is trough swinging northward, so those strong easterlies will weaken and move north, being replaced by pretty brisk but not as strong southwesterly breezes. 50 knots here coming up across the Panhandle, and pretty good wind shifting into Canada there, with 35 knot easterlies across the Copper River Basin and the Arctic coast. 20 knots, picking up to 40 knots here across the Northwest Mountains, with easterly flow 25 to 35 knots across the northern Bering Sea, and gets a little variable out here, and then southeast at 25 for the western Aleutians. And then for tomorrow's 3,000 foot winds, we've got easterlies 30 to 45 knots, 30 to 40 knots through this area, with 25 to 35 knot winds up here over the north central back down to the south, and southwesterlies 20 to 25 coming up into the southeast coast, and then taking a turn to the east here, only at about 20 knots over south central Alaska, but stronger winds down to the south. And for turbulence, below about 5,000 to 6,000 feet, possible severe here, up where that wind chill advisory is out. There, Point Lay on down to Cape Lisburne, and that'd be for smaller aircraft, mostly below 4,000 or 5,000 feet. The remainder of the areas here, occasional moderate, below 5,000 to 6,000, all of south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, western Alaska Range right out to the Kilbrook Mountains, lightening up here over Bristol Bay. And again, this area shifting off to the east during the morning hours, with moderate chop expected Norton Sound right out into St. Lawrence Island. Aleutians looking pretty good turbulence-wise tomorrow. Just some light to isolated moderate chop for the Pribilofs as well as the eastern Aleutians. And after the break, I'll return with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Bud Hodson. Bud is the owner of Tikchik Narrows Lodge, located north of Dillingham, and a longtime Alaskan. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Bud.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thanks for having me here.
So give us a little brief history of the start of your flying career, but also your lodge experience, and which came first?
The lodge came first. I came up here and worked at a lodge and went back to California my first summer. And the next winter I stayed in Alaska. And the next summer was when I decided I had to become a pilot. And so that winter I went to Merrill Field and took lessons, and in 1978 got my pilot's license.
What airplane did you fly?
150 then.
And what was your first airplane?
My first airplane was a BCD-12 Taylorcraft, 65 horse, no electrical system.
No electrical system. So how did you get started in the lodge, in Tikchik Lodge?
Well, Tikchik is where I spent the winter, caretaker, and then I guided there for a couple of years, guiding fishermen. And then I moved over to Golden Horn Lodge for 7 years, then back to Tikchik in 1986. So I bought Tikchik, I think it was 28 years ago. It's been a while.
So a picture coming up, maybe describe that picture when it comes up there.
That's at about 11 o'clock in the evening, and it's my signature photograph. I love it. But you can see the way light hits it. It was so late in the evening. And that's just one of my beavers coming through the Narrows for a landing.
Give us the story of how Tikchik started.
Tikchik was started by Bob Curtis, a longtime bush pilot. He flew the mail route on the Kuskokwim River. He had a lodge called Wood River Lodge by Dillingham, and he used to fly up to Tikchik Narrows with his anglers, and they would stand there and fish the Narrows, and the fishing was really good. And Tikchik is up on a rock pinnacle, and he used to walk up there and dream of building a lodge up there someday. So it eventually came true. I think it was 1967 they built the fireplace, and the rest is history.
So now what kind of airplanes do you fly at the lodge?
I have 3 de Havilland Beavers and a Cessna 206.
And which one's your favorite? And why? And why?
The Ferrari 206.
Really?
It's fast.
Okay.
Look, it holds less, so I don't have to load as much. It's fast. I can get to where I want to go. I fly the 206 every day. The guys can fly it too, but they like Beavers and I like the 206.
So another picture coming up on the screen, maybe describe that.
That's me standing on the floats of my 206.
And so tell me, what's a typical day like at the lodge? Get started in the morning. What's a typical day for the pilots?
Breakfast 6:30, 8 o'clock departure off the dock. So in the morning they've got to get their planes ready, get loaded up with anglers, and sometimes guides in the plane also. They're off until they get home between 5:30, well, 5:30. And sometimes they'll come back to Tikchik and go to Dillingham and haul freight, food, that type of stuff. But most of the time they'll stay out on the rivers with the anglers.
What are some of the challenges that you run into in the day-to-day operations?
Weather. The biggest single thing is weather, which of course nobody can control. And fortunately we can just roll with the punches because we have good local fishing. But I would say weather is the biggest challenge.
What kind of advice can you give to pilots to consider when they make those go, no-go decisions on weather for the people out there that are watching?
Just give yourself more of a cushion than you think you need. You know, if you're going to be flying and you might be in a position where you got to make a 180, make it a lazy 180. You know, don't be someplace where you got to make steep turns. Just, give yourself room.
I'm going to put up another picture where you can describe that one.
That's on our dock. That's my fleet, the 3 Beavers and the 206.
So you hire a lot of pilots, and you've been in business for how many years now?
34 in charge of aviation operations.
So what are kind of some of the things that you look for when you hire a pilot?
Maturity, experience, a calm demeanor. I don't want somebody to be nervous all the time. And I just want them to love what they do.
And so what about their problem? You looking for anything with problem-solving abilities or any of the other attributes that that they might have as far as how, judgment and things like that?
In my case, I'm pretty lucky because I get to hire really high-time pilots. A lot of pilots that fly 135, it's a hard grind, 8 hours a day, loading, unloading. And some of those guys, when they get a little older, a lodge job is desirable because they fly less, and they can go out on the rivers and enjoy the wilderness and come back in the evening and not be making multiple trips all day long. So I've been kind of spoiled with the kind of pilots that I've been able to hire. But I've also hired low-time pilots, that a couple of them now fly for Alaska Airlines, because we have to haul so much freight from Aleknagik north of Dillingham up to the lodge. I can take a low-time pilot and just have them haul cargo and fuel. And so they can build time that way.
Oh, good. Well, it's about all the time we have for now, but I'd like you to come back and be on our next program and finish talking about this. So, folks, if you're venturing out on skis this winter, be especially careful of thin ice and overflow. Better yet, get an experienced instructor to go with you on the first flight. And thanks for watching, and fly safe.
Welcome back. Look at the sea ice. Still a pretty good decrease here going on south of Nunivak Island right into whatever's left in Bristol Bay there. And that due to the warmer water and the northeast winds, which aren't all that cold, blowing across that area. And over the next 5 days, the ice farther to the north, or the general drift, will be off to the southwest or west-southwest up to 35 nautical miles. Moving on to the southeast coast for tomorrow, less wind, southeasterlies at about 20 knots, a little more southerly and lighter up to the north. Same wind directions for the most part over the inside waters, becoming pretty light there over the southern southeast coast, and then 15 to 20 onto the north. For Wednesday, full gales here on the south coast, and gales even up to the north there from a more easterly direction, and those will be increasing throughout the afternoon or early morning here down to the south of that next front coming up. So they'll be lightening up overnight tomorrow night and then coming back up again. And southerly winds coming up, an increase to small craft advisories over the southern inside waters, and about 20 knots for the remainder of the area up to the north. And then for the North Gulf Coast, becoming southeast, 25 knots to 35 knots here. Still gales there for Kodiak Island, northeasterlies, 30 knots for Shelikof Strait, becoming easterly after the storms tonight for the Barents and across the Kamishak Bay area. They'll be coming down to small craft advisories and gales. Northeast, Cook Inlet, 20 to 25 knots, strongest winds south of the Forelands. And then for Wednesday, same pattern, northern Cook Inlet, northeasterlies though, all the way down through Shelikof Strait with 30 knots picking up to 35 knots as you head south. And then that next front wrapping back in, tightening the gradient up for more gale and storm force winds here. We'll go east 40 for the North Gulf Coast, 50-knot winds right through this general area, and 40 knots from the northeast there on the east side of Kodiak Island. Prince William Sound, northeast 25 with higher gusts, and seas roughly 6 feet or so for Bristol Bay. East winds coming down to 30 knots, starting out with gales up here, and then those will be dropping off. And as the trough pulls westward, winds will become south and diminish to 20 knots on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, but southwesterlies 25 to 35 knots there on the south side right up towards Sitkinak. And then for Wednesday, everything turns northeasterly, 35 knots there in Bristol Bay with 40-knot winds here across the Alaska Peninsula, possible 50-knot winds, Sitkinak over to about Sand Point. Out in the Aleutians, southwest, 15 to 20 knots for the Fox Islands, and Adak and Atka, westerlies roughly at around 20 knots, becoming a little lighter and more northeasterly here, and then picking back up to 25 knots around Shimia. And for Wednesday, lighter westerly flow out here over the west, and northeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the central Aleutians. Those begin to, well, they do increase 30 to 35 knots there across the eastern areas. And for the Bering Sea tonight, or for Tuesday, tomorrow, east 30 for the Pribilof, same thing south of Nunivak Island, east 30 knots north of the island there, northeast at about 25, and then gales here for the northern Bering Sea. Those will extend up across St. Lawrence Island. And going to Wednesday, look for northeasterly. Small craft advisories now, or actually brisk wind advisories for St. Lawrence Island. Northeast 25 for the St. Matthew Island marine zone, 9-foot seas there. Northeast 20 north of Nunivak Island, and northeast 20 also to the south, and the Pribilof small craft advisories. For the Arctic coast tomorrow, Actually, 30-knot winds here. Point Lay will be the strongest areas down to the south, but you can see off to the northeast, 10-knot winds for the central coast. It really drops off once you get north of Point Lay here, and lighter northeasterlies all the way over to Demarcation Point. And this pattern holds generally through Wednesday with the strongest winds, where the wind chill advisory is blowing snow area, or the winter weather advisory is here. Point Lay on down to Cape Lisburne, and otherwise little change. And for tonight again, that front swinging northward with the gales and storms here holding, but beginning to diminish once that goes through. But tighter gradient through here, keeping them up a little bit longer with the rain heavy at times all the way down along the southeast coast. And freezing rain advisories for the Copper River Basin tonight through tomorrow. Northeast Prince William Sound, Valdez also has a freezing rain advisory, and chance of freezing rain areas of West Anchorage and the Matanuska-Susitna Valley tonight, and especially tomorrow, with kind of a mixed precipitation all the way out to the southwest coast. Pretty good gradient, so look for some gusty winds along the Alaska Range there, and also the winter weather advisory north of Chicken for the next couple of days. You could see up to 4 inches of snow, and the wind chill advisories for the western Arctic coast with those winds, gusty winds and 50 below zero wind chills with snow and blowing snow. And then for Tuesday, another trough kind of swings up here, or actually the original one, and that's pulling back to the west, so gales diminish during the day there for Bristol Bay, and precipitation becomes a little more showery here along the coast, lightens up and spreads northward, and the next system rolls on up for more heavy wind and rain, gales and storms to the North Gulf Coast, down to Kodiak Island, rain possibly heavy coming over toward Yakutat into Elfin Cove, and lighter down to the south. Well, have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.